Welcome to the Sports Entrepreneurs Podcast. I'm your host, Marcus Luer, and today we're staying in Asia, crossing over to Hong Kong to catch up with Scott Levy. Welcome to the podcast, Scott.
Thank you, Marcus. Great to be here.
Great to have you, and many people will recognize you, of course, from your many decades with the NBA, and this is basically going to be a big part, of course, of our topic. Taking a deep dive into your career for, several decades in the NBA, both in the US initially and now, of course, over, 12, 13 years, I believe, or if not more, here in Asia. And so lots of interesting stories, I'm sure, around the growth of the NBA, the period you've been part of this, and a bit about, of course, your future. So as we always do in this podcast, we kind of start right at the beginning, how it all started. In your case, coming out of, University of Albany and getting a job at Young and Rubicam, I can think as a media planner. Take us back there. I think we're here in 1992, 93. Take us back there and get the party started.
Sure. Thank you. Well, it actually started a little bit before that. After I graduated from university, I hadn't done a whole lot. I had been to 3 states, and I took one school trip to London, and I felt I needed to explore a little bit. So I found this program where I was able to go over to London and work. They helped you find a job, which turned out for me to be a bartender in a restaurant in Leicester Square. And, trying to, explore a little bit. And I met a lot of people along the way and realized it's, beyond the 3 states that I had seen, it's a pretty big world out there. While I was there, I met a woman who I actually went to school with. And, at the time we were dating, and now she's been my wife for quite some time. And after we finished, we spent about 6 months in London working. And then we traveled around mostly Southern Europe, Israel, Egypt for about another 6 months. And now really just fell in love with travel, with culture, with food. And all I really wanted to do after that was figure out a way to continue traveling for the rest of my life. And obviously I couldn't do that without getting a job. So when we got back to the U.S., I did start my career in advertising, but it was with the intention to find a way to work in international advertising. Okay. Getting to Young and Rubicam, and then eventually to McCann Erickson, where I had my first job as international media supervisor and had the opportunity to work with clients like Nike and Coca-Cola that had far-flung international businesses.
Got it. Where are you from originally in the U.S.?
I grew up in Queens, New York.
Queens, New York. All right. Awesome. Cool. So from Queens, New York, we're now in Young Rubicam, and that's where was that job? In New York as well, or?
Yeah, that was based in Manhattan.
Manhattan, right? Okay, cool. So I saw you had sort of Coca-Cola, Nike, Gillette, some illustrious names, of course, already. What were you doing for them? Actually, you were just doing media planning, as in their advertising around the world, or what was the exact job there?
Yeah, exactly. We were helping them develop plans, global plans, for the Always Coca-Cola program. If you remember that. That was a global rollout. And what we did was we just figured out how to do that best in each country. And, at that time, after leaving Young and Rubicam and going to McCann Erickson, they had offices all around the world. And I would work with our local colleagues to identify the best plans, coordinate them, and then bring them back to Atlanta to make sure that Coca-Cola was comfortable and rolling out their global strategy. It was fantastic.
Sounds like fun. Yeah, that's sort of my world too. I love that part. Now, how do you get from McCann Erickson into the world of NBA? Talk about the move there.
Yeah, I mean, that was another unorthodox step. Even though I was working as an international media supervisor, I didn't have the opportunity to travel. We were doing everything by phone. Mm-hmm. And I really missed the travel. So I went home and I talked to my wife and told her I was frustrated. I really wanted to go to Australia. So she said, let's take a vacation. And I suggested, well, why don't we just quit our jobs and go travel? And she said, you first. So I went in the next day and I resigned from McCann Erickson. My wife realized she had no choice but to do the same thing. And then we booked a one-way ticket to Beijing
All right.
and spent the next 6 months working our way south through China, Southeast Asia, Australia, and New Zealand.
Cool.
And along the way, reaching out to every one of my McCann colleagues, all of my international advertising relationships, and really did kind of an on the run education, or a little program where I got to understand by being on the ground each of these countries, and it just further pushed me in that I really wanted to spend more time traveling and working in international.
Man.
So when I got back, I called everybody I knew in the industry, and luckily one of the most important partnerships that Coca-Cola had was with the NBA. So I got to know Heidi Ubroth, who at the time was leading the international media business for the NBA, and she was one of my calls, and she eventually offered me a job to lead the international advertising component at the NBA.
Awesome. Yeah. Heidi is obviously another well-known figure, especially in the NBA. Just to give you a sense here, how old were you around that time when we were talking about now?
My late 20s.
In your late 20s, right? Okay. And the reason I we go a little into this is, we do have a lot of students and, executives who sort of want to break into the industry and trying to, find their way around. And I think it's always interesting to hear from someone like yourself, who's obviously now been there and done it, how it all started and, traveling around the world and just getting a sense of really what it is you want to do. I think it's a great starting story here. So now we're in the NBA. You're a senior VP. I'm not sure whether you were that right with the start there, but you're dealing with TV rights. Obviously, the NBA always sells rights directly. As far as I know, I've never seen really an agency representing it. So your job is to go and sell media rights to partners around the world. You had a particular territory, or what was your remit exactly?
Yeah, I actually started as the manager of advertising and handling kind of the other side of the business, so helping the partners of the NBA, our sponsors, integrate their advertising into NBA programs around the world. And then I also took on additional responsibility of program sales. And I remember my first two deals were in Kenya and Angola. I remember my boss came in and just said to me, like, you need to do these deals. And I had never done program sales before. And he goes, well, just get on the phone, start talking to them, and here's what the old deal looked like, and you just make sure it's a better deal. And I think I did that. I'm not sure how much better, but I remember it was maybe a little bit better deal. And then from there, it just continued. I eventually took over all of program sales. So my remit was everything outside the U.S. and Canada. And, we expanded our distribution to well over 200 countries and territories around the world.
Wow. Okay. And just out of curiosity, and I'm sure since it's so old, you may be able to say it. What was the sort of size of that first deal? I'm assuming a few $1,000s, right? Or was it bigger than that already?
Yeah, I think it was somewhere in the range of $30,000 to $50,000 back.
Well, that's not bad.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
That's pretty decent money. I had some on the I think their first deal was $3,000, and I thought it was the biggest deal they've ever done. So that's not bad. That's a good first deal, especially out of those countries. Now, so let's talk a bit about this sort of what I call the first decade in the NBA, because obviously you had sort of two blocks there. The growth of the business, what drove it? We're now, just to give a sense of the decade we're talking about, you're in 1996 here now, right? So the first decade to, let's say, 2006, where you were there in the international TV business. Give us some sense of, what drove it. Obviously, David Stern, I believe, was the commissioner at the time, and he had obviously great vision how to take the gospel, so to speak, of the NBA around the world. What is it what you guys were doing from a TV point of view? How do you get to 200 countries? And where did it start? Maybe as in comparison, when you started, how many countries did it have? And, you mentioned you landed at 200. Yeah,
David was definitely a visionary, and he understood that the basketball was an indigenous sport around the world, and there was an opportunity for the NBA to play a role there. He actually started distributing tapes, VHS tapes, and he would ship them, by boat, and people would pick them up and they ride on their bicycle and they would deliver them to various media companies, and David has famously spent time in China in the late 80s and early 90s, ensuring that our games were on air. Personally, did that, and he had two. He had a lot of passions, but two of his passions were the globality of the game and media. Mm-hmm. And my role was in the international media group. So I was squarely in the crosshairs of what he wanted to do, pushing us to make sure that we had broad distribution, that we understand how technology was developing, and that we were ensuring our games were accessible to our fans around the world, and by making them accessible, increasing the fan base as well. So, it preceded me, this international distribution, but when I got there, we were probably in, there were pan-regional networks, right? So sure. ESPN, Star Sports, et cetera. So we had a lot of reach. We were reaching a lot of countries, but the number of deals we had was probably in the dozens.
Right.
What was a major shift was as technology continued to develop and as countries started to launch their own local channels, we then started to do local deals, country by country deals, which allowed for much more localization, local language, local content creation, and therefore much more engagement among the viewers.
Yep. Yeah, that's sort of what we as an agency did as well. A lot of times when we took on projects here in Asia, we took them country by country. That's the word we use as well. Now let's talk a bit about maybe just you pick one or two examples of countries where either there was very little coverage initially because it's let's say football or a different sport, cricket or whatever was really popular there, and you guys managed to break into it, or even some of the bigger ones which sort of made the headline news, and maybe you can share either some numbers or a bits of stories of how they came about.
Sure. I mean, I think one of the more interesting ones was the development, proliferation of channels in China. Mm-hmm. We had been on CCTV, as I said, going back to the early 90s, but there started to be regional channels popping up, and obviously right. China's a very big place, and then you had as time went on, you had more different methods of distribution. But at one point we had north of 20 deals in China where right. You had national, you had local, and then right. you had a variety of different forms of media. So going into the country, I spent my first 10 years, I spent a tremendous amount of time going in and out of China. I was probably there, by the 2000s, I was probably there 5-6 times a year, directly negotiating those deals. And not speaking Mandarin, that was pretty challenging in a lot of cases, but we were able to get through it. And I do remember after a particularly difficult negotiation going with the Shanghai Media Group, going out to a very formal dinner where we proceeded to celebrate with bottles of Maotai, which I had not previously experienced.
Yes, I know that.
But I experienced it for several days after that dinner as well. So it took a while to recover from that, but it was an incredible celebration, and it kind of really, for me, it was just another example of kind of bridging the cultural gap. Having a very difficult negotiation, going out and celebrating, develop these really strong bonds with people that I would not have had the opportunity to meet if I didn't, enter this industry, if I didn't have this desire to travel and understand the local cultures. It was.
Who was your counterpart there? Was it Mr. Liu, or who was the Shanghai Media?
Mr. Xu at the time.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so I mean, we've had an office in China since 2004. So, I know how hard it is to do business there as a Westerner, especially if you, of course, don't speak Chinese. So there's a lot of drinking part of it, absolutely. Now, then, the key, of course, is, that the NBA really keeps it all in-house and develops it. I think whether even you and I had this conversation or with some of your colleagues over the years, we've tried a few times to represent or even bring deals to the NBA when we had a client or a broadcaster, and it sort of never really worked. But that obviously is a really clear strategy and or it's I would say a bit different than many other rights holders. Even the Premier League, right, has used agencies and sold big chunks off to agencies over the years. So, talk a bit about that. Where does that mindset come from to sort of really say, look, we know the brand best, and we don't need anyone else's help, so to speak?
Yeah, I think that's we've met it. We obviously known each other for a long time. We've had a lot of these conversations trying to figure out how we can work together, knowing how successful you've been with so many properties. But for the NBA, we view our business much broader than media. We really want to build this game, game of basketball globally, and we have over 400 people based outside the U.S. that are focused on all aspects of the game. And we take the building of the game very seriously. So when we look at our content distribution, we really want to understand who the partners are and what they're going to do with the product, and make sure that the localization is going to happen, that they are going to dedicate, it's the right time slot, it's the right number of airings of the content, the local creation of content with the local talent. We want to be part of those decisions all along the way. And, David and now Commissioner Adam Silver, really believe that for us to be most effective, we really have to be, with the last mile. We have to be in the office of our partners, and we have to be kind of all over them to make sure that they're prioritizing us as a business and as a brand. Right. And then when we do other activities, whether that be around merchandising or events and even our grassroots components, we want our partners to be involved in that, to be amplifying those elements, so we can get more people playing the game, we get more people following the game, and now with social media, of course, we have so many other outlets to do that as well, and all of that stuff ties together. And it would be a little bit more difficult if we had some a third party out there representing us that would then have to be an intermediary in that communication.
Right. I think it's obviously worked well. The NBA has been super successful, so I don't think anyone can fault the strategy there. And we'll get definitely more deeper into the whole media's landscape when we talk about the second part of your staying here in Asia. Now, while we're still in that first decade there, I'd love to talk a bit about. You mentioned David Stern, of course, that media was a big part of his strategy, and you being right in there. And, therefore, I'm assuming you've had quite a bit of interaction, and him being such a charismatic leader and, of course, well known as well around the world. Love to hear your thoughts on him and his leadership style and what you learned from him.
Yeah, David was incredibly impactful in my career. When I joined the NBA, it was right when international was starting to grow. I mean, a few years later, Dirk Nowitzki joined the league, and then after that, it was Pau Gasol from Spain, and then of course Yao Ming joined in 2002. And David had really high expectations for everyone, and you found yourself trying to live up to those expectations every day. He pushed you to be better. He did that with everyone. And, so many NBA employees have had such meaningful interactions with David where he would just ask you lots of questions about the business. And, you got to a point where you wanted to have all the answers for him. You wanted to make sure you were the smartest person in the room. And while you're probably never going to be that with David in the room, you would often find yourself being that way when you were, if I was at Sportel and having a negotiation with somebody in Poland, I might have actually known more about the Polish media landscape than the person that was sitting across from me, because that was David's expectation.
Right.
Whether it was TV households or how many channels or the cost per channels or what kind of satellite dish, all of those things you had to understand to be able to make sure that the NBA was in the best possible position in that country to have a meaningful impact and grow the sport. Now, it wasn't always pleasant. I got lots of phone calls from David and a lot of meetings with David where I went out, and I did not like that exchange. But generally, they ended up being positive, and David had a way of making you feel really good about that interaction. And again, ultimately pushing you to want to be better, represent the league better, and make sure that you knew everything you possibly could about the business before you put yourself in a position where you had to use that knowledge.
Right. Yeah, that's great. I've heard similar stories from others who've had, either worked at the NBA or someone like David Falk. Now, let's talk a bit about the player side of it. Obviously, there was still sort of the Michael Jordan part of it, although his, I think you when you joined, that was sort of more of the tail end of his obviously illustrious career. You mentioned Yao Ming, who I think joined in 2002. And, and Dirk obviously coming in there. And again, if you have a player of that sort of level, the country where he comes from automatically, I'm assuming, pays attention and rights fees go up and attention and everything else. So let's talk a bit about this, especially, Yao Ming and China, which you mentioned earlier, where you spend a lot of time. How game changing was he, joining the NBA?
Yeah, I mean, Michael Jordan was clearly, and everybody understands how impactful he was from the league. And David Stern used to describe him as, for people out of uniform, he was probably the most recognizable person in the world at one point. And I was lucky enough to be in the arena for his last game as a Chicago Bull, where he hit that iconic shot in Utah, right, and kept his hand up in the air, and that was the end before, of course, he came back and played for the Washington Wizards for a few years. So I did catch the tail end of Michael's career, and I'm thankful for that. But there's no question, Yao's arrival was also impactful. I mean, basketball has been played in China since the late 1800s. And even during, some of the more difficult times, the Long March and the Cultural Revolution, basketball continued to be a mainstay among the Chinese population. And Yao grew up watching the games on television, on CCTV, thanks to David's efforts in the early 90s. So when he came into the league, and now China had a local hero to appreciate and to support, it really did dramatically increase the fan interest in NBA games, and that it continues to this day. But Yao was also very special, and he was such a unique ambassador. He had a great sense of humor. He understood that he was representing China, but also playing in a league where he had to compete at the highest level. And after a few years in his career, he really had garnered the respect of everybody, whether it was the players on the court, the press, really the world. It was just incredible. He was a very unique individual and continues to be very active in so many ways.
Yeah, he's the president of the Chinese Basketball Association, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So clearly making an impact way beyond his playing years there. Now, let's talk a bit about Dirk as an interesting example of a foreign player in the league from a big media market. How big of an impact did he have for you in Germany? It was impactful, but it wasn't, what we found was you still have to have fan affinity for the sport, right, for it to be majorly, really be impactful to the broader business. There was no question there was an uptick, and we continue to have good distribution and good partnerships in Germany, but it wasn't the same impact that Yao had, because in Germany, basketball's not, in the top 2 or 3 sports in the country. Right. And there are German athletes competing on the global stage across multiple sports. So it wasn't a novelty, right, for a German athlete to be at the top of his sport. What it did spark was more German kids playing the game. And you can see we have more German players in the NBA right now. Right. Some of them actually still playing in the final 4 teams that are left in the season. So that's a big part of the impact that a local player has is youth development. And we saw that in China, we saw that in Spain, we saw that in Germany, and across really, now we have players from virtually every country around the world playing in the league. Mm-hmm. And that has really sparked greater interest at the youth level. Yeah, that makes sense. Again, I'm just sort of crapping through my data here. The big names, I guess, around that time were, from an American point of view, I guess you have Shaq there, Kobe Bryant, right? I think was around that time as well, his big years. Who else was there? How much of these megastars, the American megastars, in some cases, and we know with MJ, we know the answer there already, but how much was a Shaq and a Kobe driving what you were doing internationally, and they were equally seen as these big, heroes from around, to people around the world?
There's no question that, the players that are generally the most popular in the U.S. are also the players that are most popular internationally. Because once you start watching the game, for whatever reason you come in, if you come in because you want to see your local athlete, then you're going to start to see the other players as well and start to realize, wow, it's pretty incredible what those players are doing. Right about that time is when LeBron joined the league as well.
Okay.
And Kobe and LeBron in particular just did a tremendous job, as social media really started to come into play of and engaging with the local audience. They travel quite a bit. Kobe would go to China and Japan and Philippines and elsewhere in Europe, a few times a year in partnership with us and also in partnership with the footwear partners that they work with.
Yep.
So showing up, doing local activities, engaging with the audience really helped raise their profile. And now when we look at our top 10 selling jerseys, for example, the lists in China, the lists in Brazil, the list in Paris or in France, almost exactly the same as the list you'll see out of the U.S.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, and it does make sense. Now you just mentioned it, you teed it up nicely here. The stars traveling and the teams traveling. In football, soccer, that's a given, right? And everyone here in Asia appreciates and enjoys these games when these teams comes out here. I don't feel, at least, or I haven't seen it maybe enough, that the NBA is that aggressive in that space. But it does a few around the world. So maybe talk a bit about it. Again, a bit about the strategy, how you choose the countries where you're going. And, and during your, again, we're still sticking a bit to the first decade here. What sort of, maybe matches did you guys do during that time? Where did you go?
So of course the model is different, right? The way our league is set up, the NBA represents our teams internationally, and whereas the football clubs can go out and do independent discussions and travel, and they can play each other or they can play local teams. For international games or global games, as we call them, the NBA is having those discussions. And what we really want to do is make sure that those games are going to be impactful for the long term in the country where we participate. It's a limited audience that can actually get into the building. Depending on 10 to 20,000 people that can see the game live. Yep. So. What is bringing two teams into a country going to do for the popularity of the game, potentially the media rights in the future, and fan affinity across the board. So that's how we evaluate these opportunities. And we generally travel somewhere between 6 and 8 teams each year, and it's a big world, right? So this year we've already announced that we'll be playing the Golden State Warriors and Washington Wizards will be playing in Japan in October. Following that, we'll have games in Abu Dhabi. There will be a couple of other announcements for games in other parts of the world. And that, it's a very, very heavy lift, bringing two teams of rock stars by charter plane into a country to play games, to practice. It's generally right at the start of our season, so they're in training camp. So it has to be really structured, and they have to have access to all the facilities that they would have if they stayed home. Right. But it's gotten a lot easier recently, maybe in the last, maybe not so recent, but 15, 20 years, where teams understand that this is a tremendous bonding experience for them prior to the start of the season. Right. And especially when there's a local player, like in this case, Rui Hachimura of the Wizards, will be showing his team around Japan and potentially the places that he grew up and spent time, as he was developing. And that's really meaningful to the players and continues to build more cohesiveness as they start to as they start the season.
And so when did this sort of travel started? When you were, in the early part of your career there, was that already a part of the fixtures that every year a couple of teams would travel? Because I have to admit, maybe I didn't follow it as much. I'm trying to think of, how has it always been what the NBA has been doing, or it's more of a, the last 10 years, 15 years kind of.
We did our first international games in Japan in 1990.
1990, okay.
1990, and then there was an event called the McDonald's Championship in Europe that started soon after the Olympics, the Barcelona Olympics, where the Dream Team participated. So we've been going to Asia, for 30 years. We've been going to Europe for about 25. We've regularly played games in Latin America as well. So it definitely preceded me, but more games, when I started in 96, more games started to happen, right? We did our first games so I was responsible for for some of the games in Latin America, some of the games in Europe. We had an event called the NBA Europe Tour, where we sent 4 teams over to play in Europe, which is the first time we did that in the early 2000s. I had a long and arduous negotiation with Dentsu to bring 2 teams to Japan in 2003. And then, of course, we did, for the first time ever in 2004, we did the NBA China games. Right. We brought Yao over to play, which was, we played the first games in Shanghai. And let's just say the first time I walked into that arena, I was a little concerned, but it eventually, the arena turned out to be a great venue. And now, of course, they have just spectacular buildings all over China. But at that time, 2004, it was a pretty unique thing to do. And I was, thrilled to be one of the leaders to make that happen. And then, of course, to be on the ground and in the arena for that event was just a spectacular.
They are amazing, these things. Now, again, from what I see is mostly that the matches are against another NBA team. Or do you play against local opponents as well?
Occasionally. In the McDonald's Championship, that was one NBA team playing against top European clubs.
Okay.
And we did play in China one time against the Chinese national team. But, the NBA level of basketball is extremely high, of course, and it can be challenging to find quality matchup. I mean, there are some teams in Europe. We played now more recently, against Barcelona, against Real Madrid, as the level of play there has continued to develop. But we want to make sure, especially for our fans, when they're coming in, they're going to see an experience that they enjoy in a competitive game. And there aren't many countries in the world where an NBA team is going to be challenged by a local.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's for sure. It is the top of the tier there. Now, again, when I look at football, right, when these clubs come out, as you rightly said, it's a great thing for the club on many levels, bonding, getting ready for the season. At the same time, of course, it's a huge opportunity for the club to connect with their fans, with their community. And you pointed out very clearly that the big difference is the clubs can do it. The football clubs can do it on their own. There's a lot of freedom of what they're allowed to do. And I do know, having had conversation with NBA teams, that there are more restrictions because the way the NBA, I guess, is structured. How much do the clubs then do take advantage of this to try to build their own brand, their own image, selling more merchandise, selling more whatever, maybe finding local sponsors out of certain countries? How much has that sort of evolved, again, from, the early days to where it was maybe more of a novelty to now where it is obviously part of the regular program?
It's definitely evolved. And I would say the last 10 years, it's accelerated. There was a time when we had to convince the teams to participate, to travel outside the U.S. The coaches would not want to disrupt training camp, get ready for the season, understandably, because, they're judged on wins and losses and not on jet lag. Yeah. So but now, over the last 10 years, again, as more international players have joined the league and, they want to bring their team back to the country and have them experience that and show off a little bit. And, and owners have now, a lot of our owners have turned over, and we now have, global businessmen that understand the world is a big place, and they also want to bring their brand to another country. And now we have more and more teams approaching us and saying, we'd like to go here, here, or here, and we want to look for long-term business opportunities as a result of that. Right. So we've worked with the teams to make sure that they have some freedom to be able to grow their businesses. There are things that the NBA does control to make it sure it's fair for all of the teams, but teams can now find international sponsors and work with them both in the arena and in the local country. There is an opportunity to generate local merchandise, and of course there's always an opportunity to bring season ticket holders with them as part of that effort to bring them over to whatever country they might be traveling to, so that they can have private tours and travel with the team and have really unique experiences beyond just coming to the arena for 41 regular season dates a year.
Yeah, that makes sense. Cool. I think it's an interesting the tour. I'm currently involved in bringing Man United and Liverpool here to Bangkok this summer, and that's why I'm sort of a bit curious about how it compares with what you guys are doing, because it's just a huge match, right? And of course, as you said earlier, the the activities around it, putting two huge teams on a plane with everyone else around it. They're traveling with about 100 plus people, is insane. So it's an interesting thing. Now let's.
I wish I was going to be in Asia for the summer, because I would have hit you up for some tickets to that.
It's
a pretty amazing event.
Exactly. That's about as big as it gets in this part of the world here. That's the two biggest clubs probably in the world here. Now you sort of, after those first 10 years, you left for a very short period, started, I think, your own business called MJ Global Sports and Media. Although it was a couple of years only. What was the reason, and what were you doing during those couple of years?
Yeah, I mean, this was a bit of a tough stretch for me. My mom had just passed away, and my boys were getting older, and my dad was kind of struggling with life transition, as anybody would, and I was traveling all the time. I was probably out of the U.S. for half the year, and long trips as well. Like I said, I was going to China quite a lot, and I'd be gone sometimes for 2 weeks at a time, and just realized that I needed to step away and prioritize some other things in my life at that time. And it was a very difficult conversation. I was really enjoying what I was doing, and I spoke to Heidi and to David and explained the situation. They were incredibly supportive of the decision. So I started up this company after taking I took about 6 months just to help my dad move to another location, to really spend a lot of time with my wife and my boys, and really get kind of reacquainted with everything that I was missing when I was away. And then, started up MJ Global Sports and Media. MJ stands for Matthew and Joshua, the names of my two boys, not for famous basketball player. And again, the NBA was incredibly helpful. It was actually David Stern that was recommending some people to me, and my first few clients came through him. And then I just really did some consulting work, on a part-time basis to make sure I could continue to spend time with my dad and help my sister and with that and with the boys. And it was a great time. I mean, it was about 2.5 years in total, and I was able to. I did a few triathlons. I did some other races. I cooked a lot of meals for my wife, and just had a fantastic time doing all of that.
But the appeal, of course, of the NBA seemed to have, was strong enough to bring you back. And so let's get into that second half here, in a sense. What was it? What brought you back? And then, of course, you obviously moved, to a different part of the world as well. I'm not sure whether it was right at the beginning or during that next segment here. So talk us through that.
Yeah, it was to come back to take the role that I currently have. And as I mentioned, David and Heidi were incredibly supportive, and I was having regular communication with them during that time I was away. And then at one point, Heidi called me up and she goes, I think I have something that might interest you. And of course, she knew that I love to travel, and she and I had talked about the idea of me moving abroad at some point with the NBA. And so when she talked to me about this role in Hong Kong, and I had a chance to talk to my wife, it was kind of everything we were looking for. I mean, we wanted our kids to have the opportunity to experience another country in a meaningful way, and they were 10 and 11 at the time, and we had backpacked through Asia and absolutely loved the region. So it just really seemed like a perfect fit. So we took the plunge and moved back in 2000. Well, not back. We moved back to the NBA, but over to Hong Kong. And I grew up in Flushing, Queens, which has quite a large Chinese and Korean population. So moving to Hong Kong didn't feel all that different, frankly.
Okay.
It felt very natural, and my boys, it took one a little bit longer than the other, but they quickly made friends and enjoyed the school. And the tremendously welcoming community here, both of expats and locals, and of course the office already on the ground, where at the time we had about 19 people.
Right.
It just felt like a very soft landing, and immediately got to traveling, frankly. Relatively shortly after we arrived here, we booked a trip. We went to Vietnam and Cambodia, And that started both the professional and the personal deeper exploration of Asia that I've been doing for the last 13 years.
All right, cool. Well, let's talk a bit about that. And I can see your comparison of New York and Hong Kong, super busting city. But the energy in it is just crazy. I lived in Hong Kong ages ago. It was 1994 for about a year plus, and the thing I remember is that people work so hard and basically around the clock. I mean, the office lights never go down, and it just, and there's actually someone in it. It doesn't forget to switch the lights off here. And so, coming from New York, I guess there's some similarities to that. I can see that you felt comfortable. Now, your remit was, of course, to develop the region. That didn't necessarily always include China, right? Or were you still involved in China at the beginning, or how did it what was your actual remit for the region?
Yeah, by the time I arrived in 2009, we had created NBA China, and we had a CEO that was based up in Beijing and was responsible for the China business. So my remit was everything else in Asia, excluding Greater China.
Right.
Lots of countries that I really enjoy traveling to as well.
Yeah, it's a big region. Now, again, you have this huge diversity from Japan, where even during that time, it was a top country with strong TV and broadcasting deals, I'm sure, out there. You had Korea, developing already very strongly, and then you still have, I would say, that the backwaters at that time, Southeast Asia, India, where clearly the NBA was still fairly small. What was sort of your first targets? Was it to go after the big countries and try to generate more revenue there, or start putting the first seats into these, still less developed NBA markets for you?
Yeah, the first job was to educate myself, and after spending 10 years in New York, all of which I had an international remit, I felt pretty confident that I understood Asia. It took me about a month of being on the ground in Hong Kong to realize that I had a tremendous amount to learn. Mm-hmm. And I had to kind of recalibrate a lot of things and take time, really getting out into the local community in every one of these countries, talk to partners, talk to really anybody that would sit down with me for a coffee or a drink or a lunch, and just have them kind of give me the lay of the land and start to get to a point where I understood the different dynamics in each country, the consumer behavior, right, basketball popularity, technological development, economics. I mean, there's just, as you said, the diversity of the region is unparalleled. And to come in and feel like, all right, I think I understand Asia. I didn't understand a country in Asia, much less the region of Asia. So I really had to spend a lot of time and just talking to people and learning from the local team that we had already. And it took me probably about, somewhere between 3 and 6 months to have any idea of exactly what the NBA needed to do moving forward. And that's when I started to put a plan in place. And yeah, we did start with some of the more developed countries where, we saw that there were clear revenue opportunities for the league. But it was also right about that time that we said, all right, well, how do we start to really grow the fan base? How do we make sure this is a long-term growing opportunity for the NBA and not just an opportunity to grab checks where people were willing to offer them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And again, having watched and seen a bit what the NBA has done here really over the last several decades, of course, from my view as, being in the similar industry, you guys have done some great stuff, and I definitely want to talk a bit about it, what I've seen, what you did in India and places like that. But there is one place, and this is sort of, again, anyone in Asia knows it, but maybe the rest of the world doesn't. The Philippines is this absolute basketball mad country. Of course, comes from the legacy that the Americans were there during the World War, and compared to the rest of Asia, where you have mostly football and a certain blocks, of course, cricket, and then a bit of baseball in the north. The biggest and maddest basketball country is the Philippines. Let's talk a bit about that. What was your experience there, and what some fun stories you have?
Yeah, just incredible, the passion for the sport. It's definitely the highest basketball affinity market in the world, and they have a very successful local basketball league that really plays all year. that all year long that started in the 70s. And we used to say that people would buy our business cards if they could, just because it had the NBA logo. One of my favorite stories is we brought the head coach of the Miami Heat, Eric Spoelstra, is Filipino, and we brought him back several times. And I was once going with him through customs, and as we were going through, I was telling our security team that what you're about to see is going to be uncontrollable. So, but know that it's all love for Eric. So he walked through, they checked his passport. The rest of us were behind him. And as he walked through, and all of the people at immigration, the people working the passport booths, realized it was Eric Spoelstra, they all left their booth and followed him on his way to baggage claim. So the rest of us are all standing online with our passports in our hand, not knowing whether we should just walk through
when they're coming back,
go get our bags, or wait for somebody to come back. It was just completely vacated. And
that's amazing.
That showed that was Eric being Filipino, and the love of the sport kind of all came together. Those tours, we did 4 tours with him, 4 consecutive years, and those were just unlike anything I've ever experienced before. Just having a local hero, his huge family, and that he would throw a party for his extended family every year, and they would be cousins and uncles and who knows who just coming down. And Eric had time for every one of them, spent meaningful conversations with them, and then would go out into the community. I don't think he ever slept, and just do these clinics where he would put 12, 13, 14-year-old kids through professional clinics, and they would have the greatest time. It was just spectacular. And really any NBA player or legend that we brought through would have an incredible reaction, but Eric's was really unique.
Right. Yeah, I can imagine. And I have my own little basketball story there. Actually, basketball was my very first career, my first job when I came to Asia, with the Asian Basketball Confederation at that time, ABC as they were called. I was running their marketing or creating their sort of commercial programs here, and I did an event in Manila as well in 1995 or whatever, long as it's back now, and it was insane. And this is actually the funny part, which links to the story here. I had come from the U.S. I studied in the U.S. Obviously, I'm German. So my only reference to basketball was the NBA by watching, Michael during his era there when I was studying. And so that was my idea of basketball, which is at that time, we're going 25 years back, was very different than what I call FIBA basketball, right? The International Federation of Basketball had a very different style of playing. There was no mascots, there was no music, there was no cheerleaders, but that's obviously what I watched in the US on TV. And when I came here to Asia, that was my thinking of that's how basketball should look like. So I had great conversations and not so fun debates with my colleagues there in Manila, which, as you said, basketball is in their blood. They knew a whole lot more about basketball than I knew. But here comes this German kid thinking he knows a bit about it. It worked all out, and we had an amazing event, and we actually did have mascots and music and all this stuff, which, as I said, the NBA already was doing at that time, for the very first time in a more Asian basketball event. It was a lot of fun. So, I've had some great memories of my, Filipino days there. Yeah, there's some fun stories there. We could talk longer. Now let's talk India again. Massive country. Everyone it's the passion for their let's say sport. Cricket is beyond, and even football and other sports have barely sort of cracked it. But at the same time, you have you have over 1 billion people there, so it is an important market for anyone to consider. Talk a bit about it, all the things you guys did from a grassroots level point of view up to, bringing players and others.
It was more than a decade ago we made India a priority. And since then, we've been focusing on building our fan base and introducing the game in different ways. Following the launch of our junior NBA program, I was in Mumbai with Commissioner Adam Silver and Sacramento Kings owner and proud Mumbaiker Vivek Ranadive. Mm-hmm. And we did a youth clinic with hundreds of kids in partnership with the Reliance Foundation. Nita Ambani was there with us as well. We realized there was something special there. Participation at a young age is really important. And it's clear that the kids understood the game, enjoyed the experience. The parents, the teachers were really enthusiastic as well. So we've really focused our time and energy on kind of building pathways and making sure that, if you wanted to pursue the sport of basketball, you had some opportunity, whether that, you're starting from 5 years old, really all the way to joining the NBA. I mean, we've even had one success story where Principal Singh played for 1 year in the G League in the U.S. So what we're seeing in India, I mean, think about what's happened in the last kind of 15 to 20 years. I mean, there was no IPL. There was no ISL, the local soccer league. There's no pro kabaddi league. All these things have started up in the last 15 to 20 years and have turned into, have passionate followings and strong interest. And so it's really nascent, the sporting landscape in India, but it's growing along with interest, right? The country has more than 1 billion people, growing middle class, increasing disposable income, and really importantly, a median age of maybe 28. So, we see this as a market that everything is working in our favor for the long term. And we want to make sure that we're in early. We understand this is going to be, kind of a long runway to get things to a really meaningful business, but all the dynamics are playing to our advantage.
Absolutely. Now, an interesting question I have for you is, if, again, sort of a parallel, you look at Africa and the NBA obviously launched NBA Africa. This is sort of pre-COVID, and I'd love to actually hear, I know you're obviously not directly involved, but I'm sure you would know about it, where it is right now, whether it actually got off the ground, because I sort of recall it was sort of before COVID happened, and as usual, things might have slowed down. But, would the NBA ever consider trying to say, look, let's set up NBA India as a league to support the local development, and again, being as big as the country it is, build something out there?
Africa, I mean, the BAL's just, almost through its second season right now.
Okay.
And the timing of the launch was definitely very challenging. Our team on the ground in Africa has done an absolutely amazing job of adjusting to the challenges by country. We're talking about a continent here, not a country.
Correct.
And I'm thrilled and so happy for them that they've been able to get through this, and that the interest continues to grow. I mean, we have outside investors, including many former NBA players who are actively involved in the league, and it's off to a great start. But of course, as you said at the beginning, it's going to be a kind of long runway, and it's going to take some time for that to become the business that we think it can be. In India, we are already closely engaged with all the local basketball constituencies, and so when you say, would we ever consider, we never say never, but we want to make sure we're doing it in conjunction with the local sport. And that's really important. And we're not looking to come in over the top. FIBA is active there. The BFI is running many programs there. We have focused our energy primarily on youth and creating a pathway. We have an academy there where we've had more than 20 kids that have now gone through our academy that are playing in the U.S., both boys and girls, either in prep schools or universities.
Right.
So we want to continue to escalate the level of talent, but on the top end, we're going to take a lot of our direction from the local basketball operators and make sure that we're supporting them and helping what their efforts are, instead of just coming in and determining what's right for the country.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate the sensitivity to it. If you take a place like China, where there was a league and there's a different mentality, versus I think a place like India, they could potentially welcome that if someone would come in and put, at the end of the day, the same way, the ISL, the cricket league was launched, and of course the football league were launched. It required money, as it always does, and it would do obviously the same here. If you look at the same in basketball, right? So whether it's the IPL, or the ISL, they didn't start, with nothing. They just had a massive backing, and then it took off. I think basketball could be similar, and I'm not saying they couldn't do it themselves, but clearly the NBA could lend a big hand there. As an interesting thought. let's move on a little bit into the world of media. And again, my one of my colleagues now, we're working together on a project, Claude Rubal, who I do believe you know each other well too. He always likes to use the NBA as this sort of shining light of where the world is heading or where sports is heading. And I'd love you to give us a bit of an inside look into this, what you guys been building there. And that, of course, is the NBA digital platforms, your OTT platform. And then we'll talk about, of course, NBA Top Shots as well. But let's first stick to the direct-to-consumer platform which you have. And here in Asia, I at least remember, this again is probably at least a couple of years back, that you were starting to offer already on a match-by-match basis. And I think it was maybe $1, or I might be even wrong there. But again, trying to bring it to a local level where someone can afford it and become part of that journey, of course, which is outside of whatever your traditional television distribution would be. Talk us a bit through that.
Yeah, of course. I mean, the NBA League Pass product is absolutely a core focus for us as we continue to develop. And you hit it on the head when you said we want to make sure that everyone can participate in that relationship. So we've had a lot of fun with this product over the years. Technology continues to develop, and as a result, we're able to offer our fans all kinds of different experiences. We now have a wide variety of languages, so you can follow, even if you're not in that particular country, you can watch the language of your choice. We have a variety of different feeds, including mascot cam and referee cam, where you get different experiences depending on maybe your age or the way you want to watch a game. And we have a partnership with a company called Kisway, where we have local casters. Really, anybody sitting in their home can become a commentator of the game. And so we've used local influencers, for example, in Indonesia, just celebrities that are super passionate basketball fans, and they have their own feed. So if you want to watch the celebrities call the game, you're not necessarily getting the absolute best play-by-play, but you're getting a whole lot of different experiences.
You took some learnings from Twitch here. And that's on your NBA League Pass, actually.
Yes, that's
right.
That's
cool.
League Pass. So there are all kinds of different ways, and we continue to develop, as the technology allows us. So now, we're working on membership programs. We're incorporating lots of free content that will allow you to stay connected with the NBA. As you mentioned, all kinds of different pricing packages and camera angles that, whether, at one point we even had, you can join in the fourth quarter and just buy the fourth quarter of the game.
That's right.
But the best part is we're doing this by country. So, there are clearly global overlays in some of the accessibility, but working with local partners, we're now introducing more local payment solutions. We want to make it as easy as possible for you to participate through that and not have to use a credit card in countries where the penetration is low.
Yes.
We want to have more local partnerships like we have in Rakuten. NBA Rakuten app is a dedicated partnership with Rakuten where fans can access a somewhat different product there as well. And similarly with Eclot in Korea, we have a structure there that's unique. So it's really, really important that when you experience League Pass, again, like we talked about from the different diversity of Asia, is the experience is what you want, not necessarily what the NBA has decided is our global plan.
Yeah, no, I love it. Now, Rakuten, again, this is for everyone that's in Japan, obviously, and I do remember reading about the deal you did. Is it outside as well, or it's just for Japan specific?
Yeah, well, we have two partnerships. They're actually Rakuten is very, very involved in the NBA. So we have a partnership with Rakuten around media that's just for Japan. We have a global marketing partnership with them, and they also are the badge partner of the Golden State Warriors. So you'll see them on their uniform.
Yeah, they're definitely very involved. Now, just to give a sense here, what would be, and maybe it's not Asia, maybe it's another part of the world, but what is sort of the cheapest entry ticket if I wanted to watch a game somewhere in the world, if I would live in the Philippines or somewhere other parts of the world? How cheap is it, just to give a sense of pricing, for others?
Do you mean through League Pass?
Yeah, through League Pass, correct. If you obviously watch it on TV for free, that's different. But if it's a match you couldn't get on TV and you have the NBA League Pass.
Yeah, I mean, so we absolutely want to make sure that, we kind of do the business in tiers, as you just said. So there's
Right.
some free exposure, there's going to be some pay exposure, and then if you want everything, there'll be an opportunity. But depending on the country, I mean, you could get League Pass for as little as $10 the entire season.
Wow. Okay. So for a
So
whole season. Okay. Not even on a
yeah,
game basis here. Right? Okay. That's amazing. Um, Yeah, I mean, and I think that's again any sport which has obviously the volume of games which you guys have. That's always the challenge, right? How do you even get that amount of content on air? There's no broadcaster on the planet who obviously can deal with it. So having your own channel, having your own distribution platform is really the way, so that the fans can be very specific and follow their team or follow their player who they're interested in, right? And I'm sure that's all part of the strategy, right?
our expectation is that everybody will watch every game. That's 15 games a day.
Right. Exactly.
That's our goal. That's what Adam tells us. No, of
Okay.
course, yeah. We want to make sure that you can follow the game in whatever stage of life, area of the world, whatever you might be going through. So that's why if you go to YouTube, there's a tremendous amount of highlights and coverage of the game there. If you go to social media, you're going to be able to, in virtually real time, follow the game, follow the particular players that you want. And all the way, scaling up to League Pass, where we're experimenting with specific player cameras. So you may want to just follow LeBron or follow John Morant in that game. So we want this to be as bespoke as we can possibly make it. And as technology develops, we are now getting more and more feedback from our fans, so we can incorporate that both through the data and the way they use our experiences, but also in communication, the way they're sharing their thoughts on that. So we are always in development mode. We are always adjusting the way our products are delivered, both pricing, language, specific content, the ways you can access it. That is just a day-to-day experience, particularly for our next-gen team that's based in the U.S.
And I'd love to stick to that for a minute here. Short-form content. I mean, we all, I think, in the industry still believe the live content is still what is the most important part. But we all know as well that the younger generation does consume differently, and short-form clips and everything you mentioned earlier already is all part of that. And I, of course, see it here when I look at the NBA games. There's, 10-minute clip, I think, on YouTube. I can, catch up with what I missed overnight, especially with the time zone difference. Asia isn't probably the best part of the world to watch the NBA, because it's always mostly very early in the morning here. How important is clips or short form, and how do you guys monetize it? Maybe if you could share a bit on that.
Yeah, it's very important for engagement, and it's got, what makes it, this industry so much fun is it's constantly changing. I mean, now, even the question of vertical video versus horizontal video is right. Something that, you constantly have to be adjusting as TikTok has changed a lot.
Yeah. And you guys doing some of that already? Are you creating vertical video already? All right. Okay, yes. Cool.
And we'll continue to introduce more and again, more bespoke versions of that. So, it's just critically important to make sure that we're continuing to listen to our audience, and short form content was for a while that's what everybody wanted. But now we're finding that people want to consume longer content. They want to get deeper into a story, and our programming team in Asia is creating longer form content that people are consuming on social, on YouTube. So.
And when you say longer is, give me a sense.
Anywhere from 20 minutes to an hour.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, and you could, you thought that people wouldn't sit there for an hour on their phone watching content, but it's proving that people will.
Okay. Yeah, so it's sort of in the middle, right? It's not a full game yet, but it's an hour. That's a considerable amount of time, of course, especially if you would watch it on a phone. Now, again, like I said, the NBA is clearly always at the forefront of it, and so I would encourage everyone to keep watching what you guys are doing there, because you're just constantly innovating there, which I love the most about it. Now, to commercial partnerships in terms of sponsors, I haven't seen as much the NBA creating local partnerships in the region. What I've seen more is that big international partners, which you have, the McDonald's or others of the world, and coming along and doing things here. How much is that part of the strategy, or is there an opportunity to grow?
It's definitely an opportunity to grow, but it varies by country, and it generally follows basketball affinity. So in countries like Australia and the Philippines and Japan, we do have sponsors, and companies are using our intellectual property to grow their business. In other countries like, say Indonesia, Vietnam, we're still growing the fan affinity to a level where I think companies will see the value of that association. It's actually, one of my frustrations. We built this incredible program, with junior NBA across Southeast Asia and India, and we have more than 40 million kids that have been directly impacted by this program. We have, thousands of teachers that come together for our Junior NBA Coaches Academy, and they're going back into the community and teaching more kids and teaching other teachers. So, and we have millions of followers on social media across our Junior NBA handles. So, this is a really meaningful program. The messaging is about being healthy and living an active lifestyle, and we clearly have critical mass. And, we haven't yet, locked in a whole bunch of companies that want to associate with this program. That's really, right at the top of the list of things for us to do, is to communicate that this is built. I mean, we have government officials like Anies Baswedan in Indonesia, who's the governor of Jakarta, tweeting out and attending all these events. And it's just an iconic program with an incredible following. And there should be, companies tripping over themselves to get engaged in something with such a positive message, but we just haven't gotten there yet. So that's really on our short-term roadmap.
Interesting. And again, I mean, just recalling, China is a bit the opposite. If at least I remember reading about it a few years back, it was always close to about 100 licensing partners across different level, and that some could be sponsors, some could be, I guess, just putting the logo on certain merchandise or other things. I mean, that's China is the I guess probably the extreme example where the local brands have really taken on obviously the partnership in a big way, right?
Absolutely. If China's one of the top, Philippines is right there, and then we have other countries again where basketball is really popular in other parts of the world where we have quite a few sponsors associating in the ways you just described.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, we could keep going here, but I'm also conscious of time, so I sort of want to slowly wrap it up here. And as part of it is, of course, is that I believe you are leaving now after more than 2 decades with the NBA. You're looking to move on for something new. Tell us about this, or what can you tell us about it?
Yeah. So I guess at the time that this people will be listening to this, the news will be out. And yeah, I mean, really, it's come down similar to what I described when I left the NBA for the first time. I've now lived in Asia for 13 years, and it's quite a lot of my family back in New York. And not surprisingly, things continue to march forward with them. And I really want to spend more time, with my sister, with one of my sons, lives here in Asia, but another one lives over in the U.S., mother-in-law and extended family. So, I've decided that I want to spend about half the year in the U.S. and the other half of the year in Asia. Okay. And, I want to really focus my time around advising, mentoring, some investing, companies. I'm really interested and excited about the Web3 space. Right. And I've been spending a lot of time educating myself and meeting with people similar to what I did, before I started at the NBA when I was traveling through Asia. And I'd like to spend more time here. I think this is going to be incredibly impactful for our business. There are going to be just incredible number of applications, and they're going to change the business once again. So I'd like to be at the forefront of that. And while I've had an incredible run at the NBA, I just couldn't base myself in any one location anymore. And to do this job, I need to be in Asia. To work out of the New York office, I need to be in the U.S. and I really want to be everywhere all the
Maybe a little
time.
bit
So
in between.
I'm going to become a digital nomad.
Yeah, here we go. Well, and for anyone listening, ever needing an expert in this space, now they know you're out there. That's fantastic. And luckily, you just brought up Web3 because I almost forgot about it. Obviously, I do want to talk about the NBA Top Shots and the NFT space, and again, the huge opportunity which you guys created around it. Can you share a little bit, not just from an Asian perspective, but I guess from a global perspective of really how it worked and how it took off, and and maybe even what you see here, how it responds in Asia.
Yeah, I mean, you think about it, it feels like that was 15 years ago.
Yeah, exactly.
But obviously it's just recent. And the NBA, I was just on a call last night with a group of us with Commissioner Adam Silver, and he's always pushing us to be first and to be best. And this is just another example. I mean, there was this new technology that was coming out, NFTs, and we didn't fully understand it, but we saw there was some potential here, and so we kind of just dipped our toe in the water. I mean, I don't think anybody at the NBA expected it to be as big as it turned out to be, but we wanted to be in it, and we wanted to be early adopters of the technology. So.
I like when you say tip your toe in it. I mean, again, I'm not sure these are the latest numbers either, but the numbers which were out there was like in the ballpark, close to $1 billion worth of course of revenue or trading, I guess, volume. I know that's not all initial trading volume. Some is then how people sell it on. So it's not $1 billion coming to the NBA, but a portion of that through fees and transaction and everything else. It's incredible, right? It wasn't. It's not small by any means. Now, I haven't seen the latest figures, and I'm sure with certain, with crypto currently going through winter, I'm assuming it impacts the Top Shot as well there. But what's sort of the long term picture currently? What is it? What you guys see internally? Is it the same way people forever bought baseball or certain cards, physical trading cards, I guess, basketball trading cards? Is that sort of just, well, crypto will be there in the same way, or digital cards will be there in the same way forever? Is that the belief, or what do you guys see after this year and almost maybe 2 years now since the year and a half, I guess, since the NBA Top Shots kind of took center stage?
I'm definitely not going on recording and predicting how this is going to develop. I think that would not be good for my future. But I think it's going to be exponential, and there's no way I can anticipate all the different ways. But there's already so many applications, art, collectibles, all the things in the metaverse, NFTs that have utility and give you some benefit. DAOs are interesting as well. There's so many components to this, and what people are getting caught up, the hype around, token appreciation. I think that obfuscates the what's happening in the background. I mean, there's a tremendous amount of building going on these platforms, and applications are coming out virtually every day that with concepts that we've never heard of, right? So when you think of there's an app, Stepin, which has launched recently, where you actually can generate income by going hiking and running. That's a brand new application. I don't know if that will be sustainable, but that was brand new, wasn't thought of a year ago or maybe even 3 months ago.
Right.
So I think, and of course, gaming is a huge application for this as well. So, we at the NBA, we want to play in all of these spaces, similar to Top Shot. We want to try them all out. We want to see which ones are going to be successful. We understand some of them might not be, but again, we want to be with partners that are, they're going to establish themselves, that do things the right way, that have the right level of integrity. We're not, interested in pumping tokens. We're not interested in, making sure that whatever we buy goes up in massive value on the exchange. So, we're going to be careful, but we're also going to be aggressive. And I expect that we'll have multiple partnerships in this space by the end of 2022, and even more coming online in 2023. And I'm super excited to see all the different applications that are going to come out that brilliant entrepreneurs and builders are currently working on. I definitely want to be totally immersed in it as much as I can. So
yeah, it is an amazing space. I'm playing in it too, and like I said, every day you learn something new, or every week there is something new. Even and the winter is there. That's the crypto world happening, but that doesn't impact, like you said, what's really happening behind the scene, what blockchain is bringing to it. And what Web3 will really be all about. Now, again, I'm certain you probably can't answer this question, but I ask it anyway. Are there plans for an NBA metaverse or a form of it?
Well, in the reality, we really have one already. I mean, think about the NBA 2K experience.
Mm-hmm.
2K has been well ahead of this curve. Thinking about, you have your general manager mode. You could obviously dress your players, and you have opportunities for microtransactions and to build. You could play online with friends around the world.
Right.
So, we're going to be, through our partners, in a variety of metaverses, and I think that all of that will continue to develop. Whether there'll be an independent NBA metaverse, I'll leave that one for people to follow and talk. That will probably be a little bit down the road, if at all.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, and NBA 2K obviously has let's call it video game, how it started. And as you rightly said, it evolved into so much more. Again, hugely successful. And another huge tool in your arsenal there, or in the NBA's arsenal, that's for sure.
And of course, we've also been active with others like Fortnite, where we had over 16 million fans visit the NBA hub in the game during All-Star Week.
Oh, right. Okay.
So,
I guess I didn't catch that. So you had some content in Fortnite around the All-Star game, or?
Yes, exactly.
All right, cool.
And yeah, we want to work with these companies that are doing all these innovative things.
Yeah. No, very cool. I love what Fortnite is doing and how they're bringing activities in. Actually, I wanted to bring this match which we have here in Thailand, Man U Liverpool. I wanted to bring it into the metaverse, but the clubs are still a little hesitant there to let me play there. But I think that's the future, especially if it's friendlies where you're not, because you don't have the restrictions from the leagues or things around it. I think you can really go a bit crazy there. But let's see where we go there. Now let's wrap it up here, and I think we should talk a bit about what's happening in the season. We are at the tail end of it. The conference championship just starting. We got Miami Heat and Boston Celtics, the top two seats there in the Eastern Conference, and then we got Golden State Warriors and the Dallas Mavericks in Western, third and fourth seeds there. So clearly the top teams somewhat have made it through there, and some awesome players. Some of the new generation clearly, with Doncic and Tatum and others, and then you still have Stephen Curry there as well. Sounds like an exciting, matches coming here, and over the next few weeks, we'll see, who will get to the final and beyond. What's your own thought on it, and or prediction of, for the rest of the season here?
Well, I'm just excited to be able to take a breath. The reason we're recording today is because today's a day off in the season, and the games in the first two rounds of the playoffs have just, I'm a basketball fan, NBA fan, and the games have just been spectacular. The two game sevens that we had yesterday, those series were so compelling all the way through. And two young teams, Jason Tatum and Luka Doncic are so young, and we had John Morant. This is a time in the NBA where the generations we have, on the kind of older end, players like LeBron and Steph Curry. In the middle, you've got Kevin Durant and Kyrie, and of course Giannis, and then you've got John Morant and Luka and Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. So I think these conference finals are going to be epic. I don't even know how else to describe them. There are four teams that are playing extremely well. Golden State just got healthy right at the right time. Dallas just beat an incredible Phoenix Suns team and seem to be gelling. Their players can match up. They have these five players that can really cover anybody. They just switch on anybody. Jason Tatum is just becoming a superstar in front of our eyes. And
absolutely,
I go back to Eric Spoelstra, our favorite coach, taking the Miami Heat, the number one seed in the East, and once again he's in the conference finals. He seems to be making a habit of this, and what he can do with the team is just spectacular. So I just can't wait to sit back, and now we have a game every single day. One West, one East, all the way through to the finals, and I can't wait to watch it as a fan.
Yeah, absolutely. Now it should be exciting stuff here, and I'll definitely be watching a bit too. Scott, that was a lot of fun. We got a little less than an hour and a half here, but a lot of really good content across the board. Any last thoughts? Anything we missed which you'd love to share?
Only that I'm excited that the world is opening up again, and we could all start traveling, getting back in front of our partners, and continuing to do the business that you and I have done for a long time. It's exciting to get back on the road. It's always great catching up with you, Mark. This has been a lot of fun, and I look forward to seeing you in person sometime soon.
Definitely. See you here in Bangkok or in Hong Kong. And thanks for your time, and I really enjoyed this. We'll talk soon.
Same here. Thanks a lot.
Cheers.
The Sports Entrepreneurs by Marcus Luer podcasts are a collection of interviews and stories. All content in this podcast is the copyright of Marcus Luer. Reproduction and distribution of the presentation without written permission of the owner is prohibited. All rights reserved.